Welcome into the Train with the Best podcast. I'm Craig Hoffman, solo for another week. Actually, solo this week, and then we'll have a special guest co-host next week. This week, a little bit more of an interview style, so solo hosting, traditional interview podcast. Basically, here is the game plan. Dr. Ashley Bates, who we originally had scheduled for this week, we rescheduled with Ashley for this upcoming week. So a week from today, if you're listening to this on Monday when it comes out, fresh in your podcast feed will be a conversation with my good friend, my colleague, my physical therapist, Dr. Ashley Bates, founder of the Fit Collective in Washington, D.C. She's also been on a previous pod. She's amazing. And we have some, because she's been on before and we've kind of done the bio and the storytelling and all that kind of stuff, we're going to really co-host it up, if you will, have a great conversation about pain science and some other things that Ashley and I not only want to talk about on the podcast, but the kinds of things that we talk about, you know, in between clients in the clinic and all that kind of stuff. So to be able to bring those conversations to the podcast is going to be a lot of fun. So that is for next week. And then the plan is for Chris to come back after that. So Chris Gora is making his return to the pod in just a couple of weeks. This week, though, a very special guest. She's a very good friend of mine at this point and someone that I've known for a very long time. Alysha Clark is a two-time WNBA champion, all-league defender, has played all around the world as well as, at this point, over a decade in the WNBA. And she was the two-time leading scorer in Division I NCAA women's basketball when she was at Middle Tennessee State University her junior and senior year, when there was a young reporter in his freshman and sophomore years before he transferred to Syracuse named me. And so Alicia and I have literally known each other since college. We had so many fun times as really like reporter, you know, player kind of back then, but like did strike up a friendship. Alicia's always been interested in media, so we bonded a little bit over that. And then obviously Alicia starts her career is around the country. We'd stay in touch every now and again, whether it's a text message exchange or social media, or I think we might have gotten together once or twice over the decade, you know, as she traveled around and would come to whatever city I was in. But obviously last year she gets traded to the Mystics, and I was so excited. And as we'll talk about, unfortunately, she didn't wind up playing this past year because of a foot injury. But to have her in DC, we were able to connect at first just for an interview, but then we actually went to a Washington Spirit game together with her and some of our friends. And she's become a terrifically close friend of mine and of Rachel's. And, you know, it's just been great to have Alicia back in my life in a meaningful way. And so I think you'll hear some of that friendship on the pod, as well as just like some standard interview sound. But she's such a wonderful person and a great athlete, and really has such a unique story. To kind of give a quick background before I delay this interview any longer, Alicia, as I said, was a two-time leading scorer in all of women's basketball at the collegiate level when she was at Middle Tennessee State. And then she gets drafted into the WNBA, goes from a 5'10" dominant post player in college in the Sun Belt Conference to a undersized, like, what is she in the league? And was able to develop relatively quickly an entire new skill set, as we'll talk about in the podcast, you know, figuring out how to take that inside dominant offensive game, gradually move it outside, but really becoming an outstanding defender that ultimately, after a couple of years of playing overseas, gets her into the league, into the Seattle rotation, and she's an instrumental part of a couple of championship teams alongside Sue Bird and Breanna Stewart and a bunch of really terrific players up in Seattle. So it's a really, you know, then obviously she's playing overseas in the quote unquote off season. And that's kind of the crux of our conversation is, one, the rehab from the Lisfranc injury, which I find fascinating and I think is very interesting to, I would think most of you listening from like a fitness perspective, what it's like for an athlete to come back and into some of the details of what that looks like. But also when we're talking about skill development on the court and off the court, the importance of having some time away from the game, something that Alicia really hasn't had because of the nature of her schedule over the last decade. So it's a great conversation. We kind of had parts of it at dinner a couple of weeks ago. And I said to Rachel afterwards, I was like, that sounds like a great podcast. And so we brought it up to Alicia, or I brought it up to Alicia, and she was thrilled to come on and agreed to do it. And without further ado, here's our conversation. Alysha Clark on the Train with the Best podcast. Alicia, welcome to the Train with the Best podcast.
Thank you for having me.
You're so welcome.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Who would have thought that we'd be doing interviews a decade later?
Literally, as I was driving over here, I was like, when is the last time Craig has interviewed me? And I was like...
Well, we did the Zoom call when you signed with the Mystics.
But like, that doesn't count. But like, when's the last time you and I have sat down, whether on a call or face-to-face, and had an interview? And I was like, it might have been my senior year.
It might have been. It might have been.
09.
You remember the time you came by the MTTV studio? Middle Tennessee State Television,
yes.
Student TV. I think the SID, the sports information director, was like, yeah, she doesn't do that. And then you were like, yeah, I do. I'm bored. I want to go to the TV studio. And so you came by the studio and sat down for an interview.
I did. Because a lot of our interviews as athletes, it's a lot of the same stuff. You sit down with somebody in a locker room, you sit down with somebody at the gym. So to be able to be in a space that was completely different, I was like, what do you mean I don't do that?
And
I do.
Now we're in our living room.
Yeah. Look how things have come along. Things have evolved.
Things have evolved just a bit. So I wanted to have you on since like we reconnected and became friends, because I love talking to you about all this kind of stuff.
First of all, don't say became friends like
we weren't friends. Reconnected.
Yeah.
Our friendship was reconnected after, you reemerged from the West Coast in France and Israel and.
Yeah.
But like since we've been in more frequent contact, we'll put it that way.
Yes.
But especially like we were at dinner 2 months ago, something like that at this point, and we were talking about your training and the stuff you've been able to do this off season compared to the rest of your career. And I thought it was a really fascinating conversation. And I was like, I want to talk about that on podcast, note to self. And so we'll get to that as kind of we go here. But just like from a chronology standpoint, you hurt your foot when? And then like, what's the rehab process been like for Lisfranc? Because that is a really, really intense injury to come back from.
Yeah. So injury happened March 10th. We were playing, it was a Wednesday night game. We were in Lille, France. Oof. And last minute of the game, I think when I looked back at how it happened, I think it was like at 56 seconds, whatever, caught the ball in a reversal.
So brutal.
And we were like, always playing in that gym is extremely hard. Like it's ridiculous. I've never actually won in that gym. So, I mean, like dating back to my days in Israel when we were in Euro Cup and played Lille in Euro Cup, to my French league, my 3 years in French league, we never won in their gym. So, we're on the verge of winning this game, whatever, catch it on a reversal, literally just jab, push off to go drive to my left. And I felt a pop in my foot. And like right then and there, I knew like something wasn't right. Cause as an athlete, your body, things happen. And normally you're just kind of like, oh, okay, whatever. But this, I was like, I couldn't even put pressure on my foot. So yeah, find out, a couple weeks had passed.
And by this point too, you had signed with the Mystics in the W.
When I say literally just signed with the Mystics, maybe like a week and a half prior.
Oh my God.
Like, man. Yeah. So literally just signed like a week and a half prior. Then this happens. And I was like,
cool.
So hate to bring this news to you, but this is what just happened 2 days ago. So it was a whirlwind of 2 weeks, because just trying to figure out what actually happened, whatever, flew back here to DC, because I, at that point was just like, I know my body. This does not feel right. I don't feel confident. I need to go back and like get with my team doctors and the team where I'm going, allow them to assess me and see what's really going on.
Well, because that's another like fascinating part of the way you've spent your entire career. Like you've quote unquote belonged to multiple teams at one time. So like, and especially it'd be one thing if it was you were still with Seattle, a medical staff and a coaching staff that you trusted and knew, and have familiarity with. But like you're like, oh God, I got my team in France. I have that medical team. You probably have like some personal doctors that you've worked with throughout your entire career that are independent. Mm-hmm. And now you have this new team staff in the W. So like, how did you decide on who you were going to go to and consult?
Man, I deferred to the Mystics, obviously, because at that point, like I just signed with them. That's my new home. And I didn't want to bear that burden on a team that I was no longer a part of. And we were kind of already in contact about like another minor issue I was having going on. And so I'd reached out to Tony and I was like, hey, can I go to DC to get all of this looked at? And he was just like, if that's what you feel comfortable with, because, it's overseas, you get usually a lot of times, businessmen, businesswomen who've never played sports in their life running your club. And so like when stuff like this happens, they don't understand the mindset, the logic, all the different feelings, emotions that are going into something, into an injury. And so when you have an owner or an ownership group, because it's not just him, like everybody from, in management positions have played sports, basketball at one point or another. So they understand all of it. So when you have an organization like that overseas, that's a rare commodity to be a part of. And so he was just like, if that's what makes you comfortable, if that's what's going to give you peace of mind, like go ahead. So did that, came here to DC, talked to Mike, Tebow, was like, hey, these are things like I want to come there and get looked at. And then got the confirmation literally as the trainer was dropping me off back at my hotel. Because my plan, like, honestly, like I was like, okay, I left Sly in France.
Oh my God. Sly's Alicia's dog. For
He's
the
my
audience.
dog. So my plan was literally to be in the US for like 60 plus, like maybe 60 to 72 hours max, and like go back to France and like figure it out from there. Thinking it was like, I knew it was wrong, but I was like, oh, it's probably going to be like a couple months versus like something. But like when we did the MRI, the CT scans and stuff here, all of that, literally as our trainer was dropping me back off at my hotel, they called and they were like, hey, we hate to break this to you. We don't want to give you this news, but you have a Lisfranc tear and you have a bone that's displaced. And I'm like, what does that even mean?
Right. Like that's bad, but like now you tell me how bad.
Yeah. And she was literally, the doctor was just literally like, this is something that needs to be repaired. You're gonna miss the season. You're gonna be out for the year. And this is something that needs to be surgically repaired like as soon as you can. So mind you, my goal was to like fly in on a Thursday, leave DC on a Saturday back to France.
Mm-hmm.
And here I am late Friday afternoon, being like, I have to plan an entire surgery.
Right.
Like,
and get Sly out of France.
So that was probably the wildest, probably five days of my life. Like I flew from DC I flew here to DC, let's say on a Thursday, flew out of here Saturday morning to Nashville, flew out of Nashville Sunday morning to France, got to France Monday afternoon, left Wednesday morning at 6 a.m.
And by the way, are you like on crutches this entire time?
On crutches and in a boot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Left France at 6 a.m. to get back to Nashville. For
Nashville
Thursday,
home for, again, to fill in some of the blanks
Yes.
here for the listening audience.
So went from France on Wednesday morning at 6 a.m. to Nashville. Landed Nashville like Wednesday at 5 p.m. Had an 8 a.m. flight out to New York for surgery that next morning at 10 a.m.
So you got all your frequent flyer miles for the year in.
Let's just say I was very happy at the end, like with what Delta gave me.
You started at like bronze status. She's got platinum by the time she gets out of surgery.
Literally. Like I've never been platinum, and I was like, oh, I'm platinum this year, and was like a couple like $1,500 away from like diamond, and I was like, I don't have any other. Well, I ran out.
Yeah. So, I forgot a pair of socks in France. Let's go back so we can get diamond.
Let's go back real quick.
Do I get extra points for Sly? How does this work?
Honestly, I feel like at this point, if you have an they don't do ESAs, but if you have a service animal, you should get points for the service animal. I'm gonna put that. We're
gonna put that in our back pocket. Maybe we'll even cut it out of the podcast. That's an idea that's too good to just put out there to anybody.
I mean, listen. If it gets me to the next tier, or like when you get close, it's like, hey, do you have a service animal? Wonderful. Here's your reward for having such an amazing animal.
Yes. Sly, let's get us to diamond.
Right.
So you have the surgery, and then that's where like kind of almost the training side comes in. You get connected with a guy that I don't know him personally, but I had heard of before, a specialist out in Tyson's, and I had heard of it, and I'm forgetting, Daniel, right?
Dan Carp, yeah.
Yeah, Dan Carp, who I had heard of a couple years ago when Jordan Reed from Washington Football had massive foot issues, including, I think, a Lisfranc. And I remember Jordan telling me about all this kind of stuff he was doing where like you're basically relearning how to walk. Is that similar to what your experience was?
Man. Yeah. Dan's amazing. And I met Jordan.
Yeah.
I had, obviously,
now retired, lives local, great dude.
I know I'm like the most non-sport professional athlete you'll ever meet in your entire life. So I know nothing about like football players, etc. And the basketball players, it's just because like in the circle, you know who's good, et cetera, et cetera. So like football, I'm like, I have no idea. And so as I go in with Dan, he's like, yeah, and I met this guy the first day. He's like, yeah, this is Jordan. I was like, hey, nice to meet you. And he's like, yeah, I had similar foot issues. Dan's great, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, wonderful. It was the first day coming in. That's great to hear from somebody. And he's like, yeah, he was an athlete. And I was like, cool, that's awesome. So like, at least he's worked with an athlete before on a foot injury. And so as Dan and I like worked more together and, got to know one another a lot more and started, conversing a lot more, he's like, yeah, and starts telling me about Jordan, who he was and what he did. And another guy that I met in there, he's like, you don't know Jordan? And I was like, no, like, I'm sorry. What do you
I don't know football and I'm not from here.
Right. I was like, no, I don't know him. But come to find out, like, obviously who he is and what he meant to Washington football and stuff. So that was really just from like a standpoint of like athletics. It was really dope to have somebody that I wouldn't even know walking down the side of the street, but just to kind of instill that confidence in who I'm working with just through that love of sport, kind of what we were talking about earlier. So I thought that was cool.
The Train with the Best podcast is brought to you by Super Coffee. And there's a product from Super Coffee that I probably don't talk about enough in these ads, but it is such a great pick-me-up when you're like, the full Super Coffee is kind of not what I want. Maybe it's like a later afternoon. You got a busy afternoon. Maybe you kind of use it as a pre-workout situation. Something that's super low calories, zero sugar, like all the Super Coffee products are, little less caffeine so that you're not going to be like fully locked and loaded like you want that boost in the morning. And something that's quick and light, easy to grab on the go. I realize as I'm saying this that I could just be talking about Super Coffee in general, but I'm actually talking about Super Espresso. It comes in a bunch of different great flavors, including vanilla, caramel, or if you're not a flavored coffee person, definitely try Triple Shot. Again, same caffeine. It's 180 milligrams versus the 200 in a regular Super Coffee, so a little bit knocked down caffeine level, but it's also just in a nice little smaller serving size that allows you to grab it, go, shoot it real quick, basically, and it's delicious. You can also sip and enjoy it. I've actually used it in plenty of coffee drinks as well, where I'll mix it with super creamer or mix it with some oat milk, make myself a little latte. Like, it's phenomenal. It's versatile, but my favorite use for Super Espresso is that pre-workout shot, mid-afternoon workout when I'm dragging a little bit and I need a little bit of a boost. So go ahead, go to drinksupercoffee.com, add your favorite flavor of Super Espresso to your subscription order. Use the code TRAIN with the best. You get 25% off your first order. So whether you're signing up, making a commitment, or just giving it a try for the first time, we got you. The code is TRAIN with the best at drinksupercoffee.com. Then you get into the actual rehab and what's the process of the rehab to get back to the point where you even feel like you're an athlete again? Because like when you're on a boot, nevertheless, you like relearning how to walk, like you're a multi-time WNBA champion. Like you operate at a high level and now you're relearning how to walk. Like how did you make sure that you were mentally in a good place as best that you could? And, how did you kind of progress through that rehab process? And I really actually am interested as much in the physical of like what you worked on with the mindset of making sure that you were feeling success along the way.
Man. Wow. Yeah, that's tough because I was on crutches and in a boot for so long and on a scooter for so long. Honestly, I think the first 4 months.
Wow. That's a long time.
So yeah, like the palms of my hands, like the side, like females will know, like where your sports bra hits that line. It was like there where the crutch hit. And it's just like that. And like my left side was, and my knee hurt from always being bent on the scooter. It was a lot. And so, you know, not having that independence to be able to do the things I'm normally used to doing was very, very difficult and frustrating. And the first sense I got of that was probably, it was my sister that was there through that. And then, so not maybe like 5 days after surgery, my best friend and I, because she stayed with me in New York, I stayed in New York 2 weeks after surgery. So my best friend and I decided like, okay, we're going to get out of the she's like, I'm getting you out of the hotel room. We're going to go do a carriage ride around Central Park. So we get there and I'm on a scooter. So I'm scooting along, you know, whatever. And we put the scooter on the little carriage and I'm going to hop up. And so I had my hand on each side of the carriage and then there's like a step. So I was going to just hop up with my good foot and get into the carriage. Well, I go to hop and my foot slips and I catch myself in the booted surgery foot. Oh. And I scrape my shin on my good foot because I missed it. And that was like the first realization for me that like my body can't do what it normally does.
Right.
And that was a very, very hard reality to face.
Right.
So, you know, I honestly, like, I struggled in the beginning. I'm not even going to sit here in front and act like I did everything great. Or like, oh no, I totally was like in this zen peaceful space. Like, no, I struggled.
I'd imagine. It's tough.
I struggled. And so when I got with Dan, one, it was just like, I didn't know that I walked on the outside of my feet, like on my feet before. And so like having to learn how to walk on, and it was just my right foot. My left foot, I walked on the big toe, like the inside of it, but my right foot, I didn't. But I had no idea. So like learning how to like walk on the inside was like a shock to my body in a sense. And so when I got to Dan, like that was a lot of our focal point is like one, like his biggest thing with me from the beginning was my foot connection to the floor, using my foot to create power, to create that like tension. And I wasn't doing that. But again, I had no idea for so long. Right. I've been able just to kind of go and do whatever. But that was like this is the first breakdown I've had of like, how do you use your feet with the floor? And I was like, what are you talking about?
Right. Because it's that first point of contact. Like that is where all the impact happens and everything reverberates up from there. And I think it's like, it's really a powerful thing to understand that you can both be doing long-term damage and like you were slowly piece by piece getting to the point where ultimately your foot was like no mas, but you're also performing at an incredibly high level and those two things can coexist at once. Yeah. And it takes a really high level. Like that's something that I certainly probably wouldn't have seen. Maybe if I watch it on slow motion, like watch the foot, you know, maybe, or, you know, someone with my level of training could see it, but probably not. Like you're talking about either someone who's a foot specialist, like as a doctor, or a foot specialist as a PT, like Dan is. Like that is such and like, why would anybody do that until you have a problem? Exactly. So it's the kind of thing where I'm sure you're like, how could I have not done that? I don't know that there's an answer to that.
Yeah, I mean, and there's not, but I think for us, like as WNBA players, a lot of, especially like us older ones, a lot of our time has been just on autopilot. It goes from WNBA season overseas to like back and forth, and then sprinkling a couple national team, you know, commitments in there. But we're on autopilot. It's just like, what can I do to stay healthy? What can I do to stay on the floor? There's no time to kind of really break things down if you're playing year round. And a lot of us play, like I was 10 years year round.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And then it was like Sue Bird was 17 years year round. Like, and so it's like, you don't think about it until when you actually, like, this is the first time that I've gotten to break down my body patterns, my body movements, learning how I actually move and operate, where my power is coming from. And a big, you know, thing for us was like loading into my hips. And I was like, what are you talking? But I load into my hamstring. So Dan, from the very beginning, like, cause I bend down and it's like my legs are straight. I just bend down and pick something up. And I remember people saying stuff and I'm like, it's just cause you're not flexible. And he was like, hey, anytime I like bend down, he's like, hey, can you put that back? okay, now let's like get into our hips, take a squat down and pick that up. And I'm like, oh, and in the beginning, and then it got to the point where now I'm no longer like, I wasn't with him over break. I'm at home with my nieces and nephews. They drop something. And instead of just leaning over to pick it up, I'm like, let me squat down, use my legs. Then I'll pick this up and like use my power from the floor. So it was like those type of motions and like breakdowns with him that I really started to get into.
The Train with the Best podcast is brought to you by Momentous. And I'm not going to lie, this is my second time recording this ad because I almost spilled some beans that I'm not allowed to yet. There is a new exciting product coming from Momentous, and I can't tell you what it is. And I almost did. And then I had to go check livemomentous.com and realize it's not on the website yet, which means that I need to keep that to myself. But it's hard because it's really exciting. But the good news is I actually have really exciting news for you, even without being able to tell you what this new exciting product from Momentous is. And that is that all Momentous products cost less now. Simple as this. When they merged with Amp Human, not only did they bring in Amp Human's amazing line of products, including the PR lotion, they brought in extra resources, extra people, extra facilities, and they become a more efficient company. And instead of just pocketing that profit, they are giving it back to all of us. That's right. Momentous has lower prices site-wide on literally everything. So go to your subscription order. Maybe you add something to it. Maybe you've been hearing this ad and you're like, I don't know, it's all expensive. It's a pretty premium product. I hear you. We know that supplements aren't a commodity, but now this is your time. Go do it. Go to livemomentous.com. Set up your subscription order. It's going to come in at a lower price. Then use the code TRAINWITHTHEBEST25 at checkout, and that price drops again, 25% off the first order, 15% off all the refills. That's right. We're keeping our discount, even though prices are down site-wide. It's really exciting, and you're going to want to leave space for that new thing that I'm not allowed to tell you about yet. Just go to livemomentous.com, though. Don't wait. Get going. Use that code, TrainWithTheBest25, because if you're going to train with the best, you better recover with the best, and that's why we choose Momentous. The go of your schedule and most, whether it's W players or international women's basketball players in general, is actually what I'm most interested in, because it's not just the ability to break down your movement patterns and maybe work with a personal trainer in the off season in the gym or whatever, or even have an off season, right? Like I always think of as a trainer, I struggle a lot with the clients that I've had that are youth athletes, that they play AAU soccer, especially year round. So they have like high school season, ECNL, which is like their version of AAU.
Okay.
And they not only happen like back to back where the ECNL is year round, but like they overlap. So their off season is like you still have this really high level competitive travel season, and that's when all the showcases and everything are. And it's really annoying for me as someone who often gets clients that are like, well, I want to get stronger. I'm like, well, I kind of need to wreck your body for a couple weeks for that to happen, and you have a showcase on Saturday, so that's not gonna work. But for you, even at the pro level, you didn't have a chance to do that because your off season is in some ways really the W is the off season, because you have a longer season overseas where you go and you make significantly more money and provide a much better, financial foundation for yourself. But there's also the skill development side. And I know that's something from what we were talking about at dinner a couple weeks ago, like that's something that this offseason has been really cool for you. Like this actually became an opportunity in some ways where you got to work on your game in a way that you haven't in a decade.
Yeah. That's actually probably been, because like I lift because I have to, not because I enjoy it. I know Rachel's probably going to hate me for saying those things.
That's the laughter coming from the other room if you can't pick that up on the microphones.
But yeah, I do it because I have to. I know, like, obviously I need it. But for me, like, I am a curious person. I love to learn. And so this is the first off season that I've gotten a chance to like learn a new skill, right? Or break down what I do and enhance the skills that I have and like really dedicate time to be able to do it. Because, when we're playing overseas, especially as Americans, like you're seen to come over there to score, to like do those things. Like it's not time for you to develop and like not be as good as what we're paying you to be. So, like even having Eric Tebow break down like, okay, hey, let's work on your pick and roll, like decisions, like what you can do out of a pick and roll. Like, let's work on the different angles of passes. I'm like, wow, as we're going through the weeks, I mean, we started working on this back in like October, November, you know what I mean? So to be able to see the growth from then to now and just like actually have the time. And I was like, this is the first time I've had like a breakdown of like passing.
Right.
You know what I mean? And it's
and also the ability to, like, I'm sure when the Mystics signed you, they had a certain role in mind, but then they were like, also probably like, we're going to expand that role. Like, these are the responsibilities we have you in. And to be able to not have to go from, I'm playing with, for most of your career, the Storm, and this is my role with Seattle, to like, okay, now this is my role with my overseas team of that given off season. To actually be able to be on the year-round schedule with like a single goal in mind, like even that level of focus is going to allow you to elevate in a different way.
Yeah, and that's honestly one of the things that I tend to say is like, for us, it's almost more mental than it is physical at this point, because am I one of the most talented people? No, there's probably a ton more talented players out there that aren't in the league, but at the same time, the things that I've been able to do and like the role that I've been able to carve out is just how it is, in this league. And so that's the thing, is like, overseas, you're looked at to be a scorer, to be the leading person in this sense, X, Y, and Z. And then you come back and it's like, can you make that adjustment to now you're like the fourth or fifth option? You're not really involved in the offense. And so it's that mentality switch that is the reason why I feel like a lot of players don't make it, because like for me, and not even trying to be like cocky in any way, it's like, okay, I came from college where, I'd led the nation in scoring 2 years in a row. So like,
right.
Why would I not be confident in my offensive skill set? So if I come into this league like, oh, well, this is what I did in college, like I need to do X, Y, and Z. And they're like, hey, pump your brakes. Actually, we don't even need you to like look at the rim. We just need you to like get it inside. A lot of players can't make that switch.
100%.
And so in our league, it's like a very quick, like if you can't do what the team needs to be able to fulfill that role, like you're not going to make it.
Right. I mean, the classic term is a star in your role, right? Like, and the part that's left out of that cliche though is like, can you even figure out what your role is? And especially, obviously not everyone can be back-to-back nations leading scorer, but in a league that's as small as the W, because there just aren't a lot of teams, you have players who are maybe their conference leading scorer or one of the best scorers certainly on their team that get drafted and never make, or even go undrafted. And it's a small league with a small draft and like a very finite player pool. And so if you're taking the quote unquote best players out of college, unless you're Sabrina Ionescu coming in where you're like, okay, yeah, you're the number one overall pick and you're going to be the primary ball handler because that's what New York drafted her for. Almost everybody else, maybe the top 1 to 5 picks every year, are going to come in and be asked to play at that level. But you're going to go from being the go-to scorer, the go-to decision maker on your team, to someone who's a role player. And like, that was the magical thing for you, I know. And we've talked about this in other interviews. You've talked about this plenty of interviews over your decade plus career now in the W, of like really embracing the defensive side of the ball. But what I thought was interesting as we were talking about this is the idea that you never even got a chance to see if your role could expand, because you never got to, like, you were so good in that role for Seattle that you're just like, if I just keep doing this, I get to they're going to bring me back and we're going to be competitive and it's going to be a lot of fun because winning is fun. But you never really even got to explore what it would be like to change and expand your game slowly over time, like a lot of players do in the NBA or in other sports, where you have that year-round cycle of play, off-season, grow your game a little bit, play, off-season, grow your game a little bit. It just wasn't an option for you. And obviously for pretty much all your colleagues in the league, except for the couple who decide, no, I'm good with the overseas thing.
Yeah, no, it's interesting that you say it like that, because it's just a different like perspective to think of it from, is like, because of our naturally shortened season in this league. And at the time when I got into the league, we were a very heavy veteran league. You know, it's like there were very few rookies that were making it. That's why I was a 25-year-old rookie. Like, that was my third try before I even got in, because it is so limited. But now it's becoming a younger league. And so it's kind of to the point of like, before it's like, okay, well, they're established. You're not going to really be able to do what they do. So your chances are slim. Now, you know, as the years have gone on, it's like, if you like, yeah, there might be like 10 players who are young doing all these great things, but if you can come in and do a better job, okay, cool, we'll rid of them. So it's like now where it was like you had to fight to try to like get a spot. Now you're fighting to keep it. But that for me has always been my mindset, is like, literally that's the only goal. Kind of going back to what you were just asking, like, how is it possible to even set a single goal when you're constantly back and forth switching between two different roles? And for me, it's just to be better than I was the year before at something. Like, you know, when I first got in the league and it was like, okay, at least be able to face up and take a shot. Like, that's literally what I set as a goal for myself. And then kind of from there was, you know, it grew. It was like, okay, be able to shoot outside 15 feet. Okay, be able to shoot above 20% from the 3-point line. You know, it was like every year be better at something. And I think that sustained me well, because not only did it keep me in a position where I never felt safe with my role, like with my spot in this league, but it also kept me hungry to keep learning and being better. And I think that's helping serve me now in this space where, yeah, kind of like what you were saying, I didn't know what an expanded role would look like. And so it's like I didn't really know what potential I could potentially have. You know what I mean? And so to be in this space now where I have that hunger and that drive of like needing to be better than the 2 years ago, now it's like, but I'm also excited to learn.
Right.
I'm excited to see the progress of me being able to make a pocket pass from the beginning of when we started working on this and the ease of which it comes now. Like, I haven't gotten to feel those feels in a while, and it's really nice.
So this is the part of the podcast where I don't want you to go overseas again, because I'm selfish and I like having you here in DC.
It's been so great.
But like next off season, now that you've had that experience and you think about the balance, because there's obviously like the real life budgetary considerations of they pay pretty well overseas. And there's a reason that you've done that for most of your career, but now having that feeling and the experience is, you know, you're at the end of your W career, and not immediately, but like you're obviously closer.
Don't try to put me in that category.
I mean, unless you're gonna pull a Sue and like you're actually only halfway through. You know, you're a decade in. You don't know what?
What DT say? Old people can dream too, Craig. Dang.
I hope so. I'm getting there. But like, probably you're closer to the end than the beginning. I think that's mathematically speaking fair. a fair statement.
Fair. Since you want to be technical,
unless you're gonna call Sue and be like, I'm gonna beat you. I'm gonna play till I'm 45. Brady retired at 44. Wimp. I'm playing until I'm 45. But like, as you think about how you want to spend the rest of your basketball playing life, like, do you want to stack those games overseas? Do you want to like stay here and be like, all right, I want to see what I can do if I dedicate myself to skill development, to, fixing my body, making sure that I'm checking in with someone like Dan or either trainers or whoever you're working with in the off season and get to work with them in a way that I never have. Like, how do you balance or try to think about balancing those decisions that ultimately you'll have to make after this upcoming W season? Yeah.
Well, I mean, honestly, it's gonna come down to the money.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's like, if I can do something here that may not equate to the same dollar amount now, but like can equate to that amount in a quote unquote experience, then it's worth it for me.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it's just gonna come down to fit. Cause I've loved all but 1.5 of my experiences overseas in a 10-year career. So I wouldn't mind. Would I go an entire season? Nah, probably at this point, no. Like, it just wouldn't be beneficial. But like half, 3/4, you know, kind of like something I would be open to doing, but it would have to be enticing enough to where the things that I'm working on here, it would trump that. And even that's something that I learned this year, because like my goal was to try to get overseas in February, and it was just kind of like, okay, well, the things I have lined up and stuff now is it is worth it, like more than heading overseas. So that was easy for me to tell my agent, be like, hey, actually, let's stop taking offers. Let's just focus on being here and doing this.
Right. And that's the on-court stuff you're doing, but also the off-court stuff that the opportunities that you had.
Exactly. So I think, I did, like, realistically, one of the two is going to have to go at some point. Like, it's just too hard to sustain. So, and the easy answer is like, yeah, I would give up going overseas so I can be here and play. But that would have to come with some opportunities that are set up and are solidified for me to want to do that.
Makes sense. You hear that, Ted? And other Leonces that run the Mystics? Keep our girl here. We'll add dinners to the equation.
I mean, you guys...
Those have some value.
You guys, that's been like everything. I was like, I'm so happy. Like, if it weren't for you and Rachel, I would never leave. Probably like maybe once a month. Like, I'm saying, hi, I was wondering where you went. I just didn't want to be a distraction. Oh, I like that.
And now she wants to take up her friendship glory in person. Well-earned friendship glory. You can brag on my fiance.
She's amazing. Like, I seriously feel like we're soul sisters. Like, how have we not met in our previous life? Like, I'm not even kidding. Like, you would not even think, like, the way that Rachel and I have connected. And I don't connect with a lot of people in general because I'm very reserved. People are not like, some people are just not great, but I don't like connect with people like that. And Rachel was and I was like, have we known each other all our lives?
We just become best friends.
We did, like last year when we first met.
Maybe your next career is a solid core senior master coach.
Oh, wow. That would be something.
Apparently we need to get the Leonces and Brian Myers on the horn. Yeah. Brian, we know Brian. Brian, star of most recent Rachel Sand. Well, no, that's not most recent anymore because we put up a vacation reel. But you saw the Wigs reel? Oh, that's Brian. Amazing. That's the CEO of the company she works for.
Yeah.
Delightful.
That was a delightful distraction.
But yeah, so hopefully friendship and the food add some value to whatever the Leonces is and the rest of Washington, D.C. has to offer.
Send me your offers. Tisha Penichero's my agent.
Last thing, since this is a fitness podcast, I do want to circle back to I lift because I have to.
Yeah. Oh, God. Get in line, Craig.
Have you... I will ask it in the form of a question as an interested friend, but also as a host of a training podcast that we're still recording. Like, with the experience you've had now, or it's not just like lift game, like, and there's probably been more progress felt versus just like maintenance.
Yeah.
Has that changed your relationship with exercise at all as a professional athlete?
No, actually it has not. The only thing it's done is help me be more informed about my body. So now I feel more at ease with the things I'm doing every day on a monotonous level. And, you know, in the weight room every so often it's like, okay, you're doing it because it's helping X, Y, and Z. And so for me, that's enough. Like, I was telling Rachel, I was like, the way that you love bear crawls and are like, oh my gosh, I was like, that is not a sentence that has ever come in my mind, let alone like that.
That was a sentence that existed in the English language until you met her.
Exactly. I'm like, I've never said that. And I've never thought to say that.
Right.
So I just don't think it's like, I know once I'm done playing, I'm going to have to do it so I can like stay fit. And because I know I have the heart attack gene, it's like, you have to do this. But I'm not like, let me get up and go kill myself at solid core with an amazing senior master person and like then go do legs and hurt my arm. Like, that's not something I've ever been like, let me do, you know, but there's people out here and I applaud each and every one of you for your amazing selves, for your discipline to get up and do it every day. You go. Okay, you go, queen, king, you go.
There's still time.
I feel like Alicia and I are on more similar workout schedules. Like we don't have to get up and go. We can at least have some breakfast, and we'll get to it later in the day.
Why do I have to get up at butt crack of dawn to work out?
You have been on a kick lately though, where you're like done by 11. Like that's your thing. Like I'm done by 11.
It's very embarrassing to admit. And I hope nobody hears this, and then I hope nobody remembers this part of the podcast. But it's a sad thing. I am an early morning person. I wake up at 6 a.m. every day, 6 days a week, and I'm usually done by like 10:30 getting treatment.
But if you're done by that time, there's time for a nap.
I get it, but like the fact that I'm up at 6 a.m. just chipper as can be. Like our billing manager, she was like, "You're always so chipper." I was like, "Well, I got to be up this early. Why not?"
Alicia Chipper Clark on the podcast. This is so much fun. We will definitely do it again.
Please.
I'm so happy that you're getting back to fun stuff on the court and you're feeling better. And I'm glad you landed here in DC and that we've reconnected.
Me too. Thank you. And we didn't become friends. We've been and just reconnected.
Rekindled the friendship.
Thank you.
You're welcome.